Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 18th of January of 2023. Today I have some interesting updates, so let's start. First we're going to start with the Kupiansk-Lyman front line, the north of Ukraine, of the combat line, let's call it like this. And as you can see, there are not much icons in this area. The Ukrainians these days, the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians made few attempts of counter-offensive operation in this area, and as a result of those clashes, the Ukraine lost around 60 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles, and 1 artillery system M777. There is a very critical situation on Lyman front line for both sides, and for the Russians and for the Ukrainians. There were very heavy clashes in the forest line, in the checkpoints along the combat line, and as a result of those clashes, the Ukrainians lost around 90 soldiers, something around 4 armored vehicles, and 2 special raiders, INT PQ-50 and 48. When talking about artillery duels, I believe that there are not much updates in this area, just one artillery system on the Kupiansk front line. But when talking about these these updates, we don't understand the real thing, we just understand the situation in the global scope. But I tried to analyze the Russian reports from this area during the week, and I found very interesting situation. When talking about Kupiansk front line, the Russians, mainly they attacked the 14th Mechanized Brigade. Let's return to the deployment map for better understanding. This is the 14th Mechanized Brigade. The Russians tried to attack 92nd Mechanized Brigade, and the Russians attack 103rd Defense Brigade in this area. So this is the most powerful, the most organized brigades in this area, and this is the base of Ukrainians. This is the base on this front line, and I believe that Ukrainians are planning to use these forces for upcoming offensive operations. So 14th, 92nd, and 103rd Brigade. If you are able to follow this table, so you will see that, let's say, if we are talking about 14th Mechanized Brigade, you will see that the Russians started actively attacking this brigade somewhere on the Saturday of previous week, and they haven't stopped even for a day, just on Monday, since the Saturday the previous week. So we can say that this is some kind of artillery preparation in this area against the 14th Mechanized Brigade. The same situation we can say about the 92nd Brigade. As you can see, during the previous 4 days in a row, the Russians continue attacking and shelling this 92nd Mechanized Brigade without even the possibility of giving any rest for this army. And the same situation with 103rd Defense Brigade, and I believe when talking about 103rd Defense Brigade, I believe that this is the most interesting picture, because as you can see, the Russians started attacking this brigade even on Tuesday of the previous week, and around more than 1 week they're attacking and shelling this brigade in a row, trying to reduce them as much as possible. This 103rd Brigade located in the area between Nevskaya and, let's say, Makiivka, the South Lyman area. So, and this is like some kind of meat from the Ukrainian perspective. We're talking about type of army. There are a lot of forces, and of course, if the Russians want to start any offensive operation in this area, first they need to reduce the defense forces, something like this defense that's the most populated brigades in this area. And as you can see, the attack against 14th, 92nd, and 103rd Brigade shows in a row for a week, for more than a week, shows that the Russians are preparing for something. Of course, it's highly unlikely that at some day some commander will say that these brigades, you need to start offensive operation, and the Russians started attacking in this or that area. Of course, before any offensive operation, we can see some kind of artillery preparation. And I believe that this concentration of attack in this area tell us about some kind of artillery preparation on the Kupiansk front line. The same stories we can say about Lyman front line. There are also a lot of brigades, but not all of them are under Russian attack. When talking about the most intensive fire against 18th, against 95th Air Assault Brigade, against 18th Air Assault Brigade, and the same 92nd Brigade, that I believe that some parts of this brigade were deployed in Lyman front line as well. When talking about this table, you're gonna see that 92nd Brigade is also at the very heavy fire and almost at the same at the same days as 14th were attacked, the 92nd were attacked as well, and the same thing about 95th. But 95th is under very heavy fire because this brigade is stretched all over the front line, over the combat line, this air assault brigade, and that's why they're under very heavy fire. And the same situation with the 18th mechanized brigade, as you can see. So the Russians tried to attack the brigades that located in this forest. And as we discussed, the Ukrainians are completely prepared to start storming of Kremina. And when talking about this map, furthermore, the deployment map shows that the Russians were forced to deploy some Brigade 74th and 72nd Air Assault Divisions in this area just to reinforce this area, not to allow the Ukrainians to penetrate the front line in this area. So something very interesting is going to happen on this front line. Now let's move to Kupiansk, to Soledar, my bad. And when talking about Soledar, the front lines are stable. But when talking about the report of Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, today they reported that the Russians established 100% control over the town by the name of, over the railroad station by the name of Sol. So now this information officially confirmed by the Russian military authorities. I believe that the Russians need few days to complete regrouping. They still attack in direction of Krasnopolovka. The Russians still try to establish control over Krasnogora. I believe that the Russian sources map is not updated. I believe that the Russians have some control inside of this small town. Furthermore, the Russians storms Blagodatne. As you can see, the Russian source map has been updated in the area of the railroad of the salt mine number 7. Now, a half or maybe some part of this mine or this industrial zone is under Russian control, and they're continuing clearing operation in this area. When talking about Donetsk area, the Ukrainians lost around 90 soldiers and something around 7 armored vehicles in this area, and around 2 artillery systems, 1 Grad and 1 Msta-B howitzers in this area. Another important update about Bakhmut and Soledar. From one side, we see that the Russians pushes in this area and try to force the Ukraine to step back and so on. And today some sources are saying that, if you remember a few days ago, I told you that Zaluzhny, the head of Ukraine army, asked Zelensky to give an order to step back from Seversk and Bakhmut and not to lose the soldiers. And today the same sources reported that Zelensky gave an order to Zaluzhny, the head of the Ukrainian army, not to step back from Bakhmut and to keep Bakhmut till the last Ukrainian. So this is the reality. So we won't see easy battle for Bakhmut anyway. The Russians and the Ukrainians will be forced to lose soldiers in this area, and maybe the Ukrainians, with help of this, will be able to to get some time and to get more Western and modern weapon. But when talking about Bakhmut Soledar, there are a lot of interesting updates. First of all, the Ukrainians deployed 72nd Air Mobile Brigade near Azdolovka just to prevent the Russian penetration from Soledar in direction of Seversk and so on. When talking about the forces, I know that today we received a very interesting update that the Russians they have split it in this area. And when talking about Wagner's, their main goal is to continue storming of Bakhmut and the towns that located on the north of Bakhmut, between Bakhmut and Soledar. So this area is the area of responsibility of Wagner's. And today, first time I believe in a row, we received an update that when talking about Seversk front line, the Russian special forces Akhmat is the main forces, responsible forces for this area. It's Chechensky Spetsnaz, and and according to information I have, these forces will move from the south, from Soledar, in direction of Seversk. And furthermore, today there were very heavy clashes in Bilogorovka, and the same special forces Akhmat were attacking in this direction. We haven't heard about Akhmat for a very long time. I believe that the last time I heard some big updates from these special forces Akhmat after Lysychansk agglomeration fell, so, and no more updates from that time. But I believe that they complete some kind of training operation, some kind of regrouping, and now the special forces are ready to continue their offensive operation on Lysychansk direction, in direction of Seversk. Okay, another interesting update that Ukrainians deployed 119th Brigade in Paraskovievka. This Paraskovievka, so this territory defense brigade, they decided to deploy them on the north, just like a lot of main power, a lot of forces with one purpose, to slow down the Russians and to reduce, I believe, the Russian artillery shells by their own bodies or something like this. When talking about the south, the Ukrainians deployed 24th Mechanized Brigade in the area of Klishevka. Where is the Klishevka? This one. 24th Mechanized on the south. The Ukrainians understand that the Russians are moving from the south. They're almost encircle Klishevka, and by taking Klishevka, the Russians will achieve some kind of door or gates from the south to attack in the middle, in the central part of Bakhmut. So that's why they decided to reinforce the South Bakhmut area with 24th Mechanized Brigade and furthermore with the 3rd Operational Brigade National Guard. So I'm not saying that this brigade is completely located there, but just for better understanding of the situation, which brigades, which groups, which battalions, and where they're located. Okay, another interesting update is that about Kremina, one more thing. The Ukrainians deployed 95th Brigade in the forest from this on the south of Bakhmut, and 27th separate Brigade National Guard. So the Ukrainians are completely ready to start storming, but I don't know why they're not starting. No, they're not doing this. Another important update, one more time about Kremina. The August and the end of August and the beginning of September, that there were 2 months when we saw almost the same picture as we can see these days on Kremina Lyman front line. But the same picture we were able to see on Kherson front line, and mainly we were talking about 16s, 60s, 66 and 28s, I believe 48s brigade. Those brigade who in the future later on 128 later took participation in the storming operation of Kherson. So the Russians knew the plans of Ukrainians, and every single day they were attacking these main brigades. But believe me, if you remember, it helped because the Ukrainians, when they started their offensive operation, couldn't penetrate the Russian area. They stuck in Davidov Brod and so on. They couldn't cross a lot. They couldn't pass a lot. I believe that was the result of effective artillery attacks from the Russian side. So now the Russians are doing the same. They completely targeted just the same brigades in this area with one purpose: to reduce their manpower, to reduce their spirit, to reduce their ammo depots in this area, and not to allow them to be effective in upcoming offensive operation in the direction of Kremina, possible offensive operation in this area. When talking about Marinka, Lyman, Marinka and Donetsk, Opытная, Pesky front line, today the Russians report about some progress in this area. As a result of some clashes in near Opытная, they managed to short the front line between these two lines. A few videos a few months ago, maybe weeks, there was an update that the Russians established control over these trenches, but I believe that maybe the Russians got control, but then they were forced to step back or something like this. So these days, these 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their bridgehead in this area and just to short the front line in front of Avdiivka fortifications. There are still a lot of job to do. There are still a lot of trenches to crack, but anyway, there's no other options, any other option, not but they need to do this. When talking about South Donetsk front line, the same story. Marinka still haven't been taken by the Russians. They managed to, these days they're completing the clearing operation in the central part, and there are just one block left, the western part of Marinka. But when talking about western part of Marinka, this part of Marinka is under responsibility of 35th Marine Brigade, this completely fresh brigade that were deployed in this area. So I believe the Ukrainians do have some time to hold Marinka for a while. I'm not saying about months, but maybe a few weeks they will be able to hold this area. But anyway, sooner or later they will be forced to step back. And when talking about Donetsk front line, the Ukrainians lost around 90 soldiers and something around 12 armored vehicles. So as you can see during the day, the Ukrainian had a lot of losses. Kupiansk 60 soldiers, Lyman 90 soldiers, Donetsk 90 soldiers, South Donetsk 90 soldiers. So there are very heavy clashes all over the front line. but without movements on the front line. I believe that soon we're going to see some updates, because this weekend we're going to see another minus on the temperature will be below 0 according to Celsius, and maybe some party will do some movements during these days. Maybe not, maybe the window won't be so big or so wide to do something, so we'll see. Anyway, in the next February is the next month, and on the 20th of February is some kind of anniversary, 1 year since the beginning of a special military operation. And we know the Russians, and they like to do something by some dates, so I believe that there are some orders, some commands to achieve some goals, some objectives by that date. And of course the Russians will try to celebrate this year, or if we can call this like celebrate or something like this. But anyway, by the end of the first year of the special military operation, the Russians will try to achieve another goals, very important goals. Maybe they will try to take Marinka by that time. Maybe they will try to do something with Seversk by that time. Maybe they will try to encircle Bakhmut by that time. Anyway, we're going to see something in less than 20 days. And that's it for today. Military Summer channel reminds you to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon. Have a good day. Bye bye.